Hello there, this is Lisa Quintana, your friendly Christian apologist. I'm going to be talking tonight about the cosmological argument, and I hope to unpack the wonder of the cosmos. And just like you, I'm interested in origins, and I think any thoughtful person questions what started all of this. So before I get into it, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my backstory and why I'm interested in this subject. First off, I want to let you know I'm not a scientist, but I really do love science, and I have a personal connection to it, as you'll see here in a moment. But being raised in a family in Southern California, my mom tried to teach my brother and I about God when we were really little. But we fell away by the time I was about probably 8 years old, and we basically embraced sort of a secular humanism. And secular humanist is a system that focuses on human beings rather than supernatural or divine insight. And it basically says that people are inherently good. And that's the way I was mostly raised, from probably third grade all the way through college. And I really, really wanted to believe these things, especially the inherently good part. I remember finding out that some other views didn't believe that people were good, and I thought, that's just wrong. I would never be like that. People are good. But here's the problem. My worldview didn't line up with my reality. Because when I really thought about it, I kept on getting my heart broken over and over again by people or circumstances or whatever. And so I really started thinking, I'm not quite sure this inherently good thing is really all what I think it's supposed to be. And primarily, it wasn't just me looking at other people's stuff. I was pretty messed up myself and doing some stupid stuff. And so my worldview kind of started crumbling. And I was probably a senior in college when I finally got reintroduced into Christianity, and I became a Christian at 25 years old. Now, that's not a picture of me when I was 25. I don't actually have very many pictures of me when I was 25. Back then, we didn't have iPhones with all these cool camera stuff on it, so we didn't take a lot of pictures of ourselves back then. But when I became a believer at 25 years old, because my family wasn't Christian, there were a lot of skeptics in my family, and they kind of mocked me a little bit and made me feel like I joined some type of cult or whatever, and they just didn't understand what was going on with me. And I can sort of get it, because I came out of some pretty rough patches and didn't make really good choices a lot, and so I think they probably just assumed I was making another bad choice by becoming a Christian. But I really needed to learn more about what I believed and why I believed it. And so I started studying apologetics. And for those of you who don't know what that means, that's just basically the reasons why Christianity is true and a reasonable faith to put your trust in. So even though I became a Christian and I was raised in the same household as my brother became a scientist. And he is now an evolutionary ecologist. He was an atheist, and now he's an agnostic. So he doesn't necessarily believe in anything that you can't prove scientifically. He is most likely a materialist. In other words, he doesn't believe in anything supernatural. And we have very different worldviews. But can we still get along? Yeah, we can. And I think science and faith do not need to be at odds either. I think that that's a bad thing that's happened to society, where people of faith and scientists seem like they have to be at odds with each other. I don't necessarily believe that, and I think it's not a good place to stay. I hope that we come together more as two thinking communities that can encourage each other. So that's a little bit of my backstory. Now I want to get into the main topic of the evening by asking this question first. Why does anything exist at all? So to answer this question, we're going to be using logical inference, and then we're going to come up with the best explanatory power for why anything exists at all, using primarily reasoning, And the use of reason became extremely valuable during the Enlightenment period. Historians of science identify the shift away from a theistic foundation of modern science with three major developments in Western intellectual history. That first development was the Enlightenment idea that human reason could replace and function autonomously from religious belief. And then there was an increase in skepticism about the existence of God. And then there was a rise of scientific materialism, basically affirming matter and energy rather than God. So that started several centuries ago, like I said, during the Enlightenment period, 1700s. And it still is with us today, that sort of mindset. And so today, a lot of people believe that science can explain it all. And the cover of Time magazine back in the 1960s asked the question, is God dead? Darwin, basically came up with a theory of evolution that sort of suggested that maybe we didn't need God as the creator of everything. And so a lot of people have embraced science as the truth teller today. And science is great. I mean, I'm not knocking science, and I want you to understand that I think science is really amazing, but it doesn't explain all of life's phenomenon. For example, science can't tell us what things are. It can only tell us what things are, but it can't tell us what to do with those things. And we can't use the scientific method to get outside of the universe to answer what created it. We need to use logical inference. So there's lots of things about life that just won't fit in the scientific method. And there are some abstract concepts and things also that we all take for granted that we know are true, but science can't measure those things. That would be truth. That would be mathematical equations, which are used by science, but they're abstracts. There's not a number 3 walking out there by itself. That's an abstract, immaterial concept that we take to be real, even though we can't physically see a number 3. We can only see what a number 3 describes. So there are things about life that don't necessarily fit into the standard scientific method. So that's why we have to use other forms of knowledge and reasoning. So let's go ahead and get into theories that have been talked about that maybe are the reasons why there is something rather than nothing. And one of those theories is called the steady state theory, where for many, many years, most scientists and many people thought the universe existed eternally. That it was in a steady state, neither expanding or collapsing, but eternal. But this was eventually disproven because of relatively recent discoveries. And I'm kind of stumbling on that word because of the next slide. Einstein's general theory of relativity. And this says that a static universe would be gravitationally unstable, because this theory says everything needs to be either moving away from one another or collapsing towards one another if the fabric of space obeyed Einstein's theory. So Einstein came up with this theory, and he started realizing that it just might have some very unique implications. And these implications were confirmed by a guy named Edwin Hubble, who discovered the Hubble, or didn't discover that. He made the wonderful Hubble telescope that we have today. And in this telescope, it was discovered that distant galaxies were expanding away from the Earth in all directions. So scientists realized that the universe wasn't static at all. Instead, it was expanding. So that kind of rocked everybody's scientific world, and they started looking at things differently, and they had to. And so they had to get rid of the name of the steady state theory, because it wasn't descriptive of what was really actually happening. So they came up with the Big Bang theory. And this is the dominant theory of the origin of the universe. And basically this theory states that the universe began from an initial point or singularity, which has expanded over billions of years to form the universe as we now know it. So, who discovered this Big Bang? It was actually discovered in 1927, believe it or not, almost 100 years ago, by a Roman Catholic priest and physicist, Georges Lemaitre, who independently calculated that the matter of the universe would reach an infinite density and temperature at a finite time in the past. So this meant that the universe must have begun in an incredibly small, dense point of matter, a definite moment of creation to the universe. And these findings have been confirmed by three main indicators. The first one is the second law of thermodynamics, which is basically the law of decay, shows the universe is running out of energy. Then the expansion of the universe, again, Einstein's theory of relativity used to figure this out, and the Hubble telescope and stuff. And then the radiation echo, these ancient light trails they were able to measure and see. And so these three main indicators confirmed the Big Bang theory. But some scientists did not like this singularity theory. And so Fred Hoyle brought it back onto the table in 1948 because he didn't like the idea of a creation event, and he argued for an expanding steady-state universe with no beginning or end because he thought this new cosmological picture was disturbingly close to the biblical account. So regardless, the singularity of the universe having a distinct beginning is still the dominant theory today. And there's ongoing observations that showed this. During the 1950s and 60s, more observations led to evidence against the steady-state hypothesis. These included the discovery of bright radio sources, like quasars and radio galaxies, which were discovered in galaxies far from ours, and showing that many galaxies became radio quiet over time. So steady state, it wasn't this all to say is that there wasn't a steady state to the universe at all. And the Big Bang is still the dominant theory today. And it shows that it did begin to grow from a single point about 13.8 billion years ago. And it was a phenomenal event. But I'm not quite sure the terminology Big Bang is probably the best name for it. I think a better term for what happened, in my opinion, would be the precision event. Because in the singularity were cosmic constants, laws that basically govern our universe. It's kind of like a computer program coded with information. So this infers that the universe itself cannot be infinite, which leads to an argument known as the Kalam Cosmological Argument. This was first developed by Muslims centuries ago. It's receiving new interest today, and it's really basic, and it's developed in more ways by a Christian philosopher named William Lane Craig. And this is his take on the Kalam. And the first premise goes, whatever begins to exist has a cause. And I wanted to underline begins to exist because that's the most important point, is that whatever begins to exist has a cause. So the universe definitely began to exist. I've just shown that. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Well, that's pretty basic, right? But one must wonder, what caused this? So what is that first cause? So whatever caused this has to be outside of the known universe. It has to be outside of time, aka eternal, outside of space, or immaterial, and uncaused, a necessary entity. Why? Well, because all things began in the Big Bang moment. All matter, all space, all time. So whatever had to start, it has to be outside of time, outside of matter, outside of space. So we're going to be looking at the best explanatory power for what that cause may be. But I know you know where I'm going with this. I'm a theist, so obviously I'm going to go in that direction, but I want to at least consider other possible ideas. So let's consider some alternative causes. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a super fan of Doctor Strange. I think he's great. I love Marvel's multiverse concepts, and there's multiverse concepts and all kinds of things now. And Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness is a movie coming out soon, and I'm definitely going to go see that. But is this a viable option, though, to the cause of our universe? I mean, it makes for great science fiction, but is it really something that can explain everything as we know it? Well, Dr. Stephen Hawking certainly thought so. He says because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. So Stephen Hawking believed gravity caused our universe and thus causes other universes to come into existence. So it's mathematically possible, but there's no evidence that it's real. We'd have to travel outside of the universe to examine it. So we can only theorize about it. There's no way to really know for sure. But even if it was true, you have to ask yourself this question. What created the law of gravity? I mean, that's still something. That's something that is out there. Who did that? How did that just come to existence? So let's consider an infinite number of universes popping into existence. Is that possible? Can we have that just popping up? Well, according to philosophers, and again, this is a question that cannot be asked or can't be answered by using the scientific method. It has to be a philosophical answer to this. But an infinite regress of physical events cannot exist, because any change occurring within space-time, aka physical universe, has to have a start. Otherwise, we'd never arrive at this present moment. Does that boggle your mind like it boggles mine? I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that, but here's a really basically oversimplified way of giving you sort of an analogy of what that may be like. It's kind of like a ball dropping and going down and down and down and never stopping to make a now moment. So that's really oversimplifying the infinite regress, but I wanted to sort of give you an understanding of why it's probably not possible that these universes just kept on popping into existence forever, because they're physical. It's all about physical causes, and physical causes need a first cause. And this is not a new idea. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle said there is a difference between a theoretical infinity and an actual infinity. You can't practically put an infinite number of things between 2 points. So we can't have an infinite number of physical events going back eternally. There must be a first cause, or what another philosopher I know calls it, the foundation of everything. So what is this foundation of everything? Well, a student once asked me if the cause could be some sort of neutral force that started this chain of reactions to create the universe. Could it be an impersonal force? Well, it's reasonable to believe that impersonal forces don't cause at will. Now, I'm not saying 100% absolute proof. I'm just saying it's reasonable. It's like a court case. You present a case and you have a reasonable doubt, or you get enough information to make a good estimated inference. So if we accept an uncaused first cause, it's plausible that this is a personal force capable of willing the beginning of the universe. So it's reasonable to simply recognize the attributes of this cause as intelligent and powerful. A lot of scientists now are talking about the theory of information, because there's a bunch of information coded into the beginning of the universe. So it implies if information is there, then something had to inform it. So, one other question I want to ask you, and I'd like you to think about this. It's a really important question. Did matter create mind, or mind create matter? So that's something I wrestled with a lot, and it made sense to me how to answer that. But all of these things I've been telling you basically do not point to a certain religion. It only suggests it is a reasonable inference that there might be an intelligent designer behind the cosmos. If there is an intelligent designer, or God, why does it even matter? How would that affect our lives? So I'm going to leave you with this final question by a recording artist friend of mine, Erin Michelle. She has a fabulous concept album all on apologetics. So here is the song. Okay, so here are some of my final thoughts. By definition, God seems to hold the best explanatory power for the cause of the cosmos as we understand it. You can certainly disagree with this conclusion, keeping in mind that we all have biases, either towards materialism or theism. But it's important to note that this conclusion is not based on blind faith. It's a reasonable inference using logic. So, if you are interested in learning more about this and in the intelligent design movement arising in the scientific arena, there are some sites here that I recommend and a book that recently just came out. So I'll leave the slide up for you, and you could jot down these or take a picture of them or whatever you want to do. And then we can open it up for Q&A.